Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising, which is day 4 of a 5-day program on self, health, regeneration, and healing. It's been quite a week as we began with coherence breathing, which is a technique that we start out with virtually every day here on Humanity Rising. We looked at evolutionary somatics. We've looked at dowsing, the tarot, muscle testing. And today we're going to delve into the therapeutic and healing power of sound as we seek to understand more deeply how the human being, how our bodies, how our emotions can all come together in a resonant way through a variety of portals. The extraordinary thing about self-healing is that there are dozens, if not hundreds of ways that all of us every day through practical exercises and practices can fortify our entire beings in a way that enables us to navigate more skillfully and with greater calm through a world of increasing turbulence and chaos. I'm delighted to welcome Deanna Rice, who has been convening not only this week, but other weeks here on Humanity Rising, polarity practitioner, a hypnotherapist, someone deeply immersed in energy medicine, and has sought throughout her entire career to bridge ancient wisdom and modern science. So Deanna, thank you so much for everything you've done to bring an extraordinary group of people together to empower us all to just be more abundantly healthy in our day-to-day lives. So welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much. So glad to be here the 4th day. I am so excited to share with you one of my mentors, and I consider him a hero of mine, sound healer extraordinaire, Dr. John Beaulieu. We're going to start out the program with a little sound bath from John. He is a naturopath. He's a psychologist. We are getting him from upstate New York in his beautiful studio. Hi, John. And we're excited for his presentation. He'll do a little science presentation, then I'll come back in and talk to him about it. So I turn the program over to you, John, for a little sound bath for everyone.
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you, yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here, to be able to share with you. And I know that you start with coherence, and the topic of I'm going to speak about today is actually coherence. We call it coherent resonance. It's the basis of consciousness. And sound has been used as a tool, one of those gateways to bring us into coherence for thousands of years. And I want to start today. We can start with some breathing as I get my tuning forks ready. I like breathing too. It's one of the greatest ways to achieve a coherent state. Well researched, evidence-based, and so is sound also. Later we'll do science, and I'll show you the work that we've done in the laboratory, showing how sound can be used as a daily meditation with breathing. I think they work together. All these things piggyback off each other. They work together very well. So what I want to do is I have 3 tuning forks, and I like to move my body a little bit, so I'm going to tap them, and you can breathe in, relax, and breathe out at your own rhythm. Just let it go evenly and naturally. And as you listen to the sound, allow your thoughts to come and go effortlessly, and allow yourself to come into resonance with the sound. Once you come into resonance, it's resonance that ultimately will create frequency coherence. So with that in mind, we'll have a short concert. The concert is based on Leonardo da Vinci. I call it the Leonardo Concert. I will just explain it for a moment. Leonardo, as you know, has his hands out like so, and they go and touch a circle, and they touch a square, and they touch the square and circle at the same time. And it's called the Venturian man. And when he touches the square, it represents earth. That would be this tone. When he touches the circle, it represents heaven. It's this tone. And when he touches heaven and earth, the square and the circle at the same time, it's this tone. Which is in music, a C and a G are what's called a perfect fifth. Earth is a fourth and A is a sixth. Together, they make like wings flying back and forth from heaven to earth. Enjoy. If you like the concerts, they're all recorded and free or for donation for anyone around the world. I have lots of sound healing recordings, including this concert, and I have different tunes, different brainwaves, anything that's available to you, and we'll make so that you can have access to that. I will give you the website for it in just a moment. But right now I thought we would do a little bit of science, because it's very important that we have art and science merged. We would say that we want, this so that we could have a balance. And so what I'd like to do is show you with some LCD slides what we would call coherence and sound, and also how it affects your neurological system, and how sound could be antibacterial, antiviral, anti-tumor when you come into coherence. It's the biology of coherence. Good. So,
sorry, John, we're seeing again the
Again.
thing, the overview. We don't see the main
have-
slide as we did before.
I'm not sure how to correct that. So, can you see any slides?
Yes, we see your slides, but in that vertical
Oh.
pattern.
Let's try it again.
Yeah. There we
Now it
go.
works.
Okay, that worked. All right. So, I'd just like to talk to you about human tuning. And we want to think of ourselves, and this is science, basically the whole universe that we live in is a vibrational universe. The word quantum means to quantify vibration. And I talk about several types of quantification. I talk about quantification with numbers. That would be a quantified vibration, and we also call qualitative vibration. So we can quantify numbers, and with tuning forks can be quantified with numbers. And a qualitative vibration is something that we feel. In psychology, it's called a feeling tone. And of course, the qualitative vibration and quantitative vibration make a teeter-totter. They work together. They're needed at different times, at different levels. So human tuning involves neurocoherence, neurodissonance, neuroplasticity, and self-regulation. So we'll go over these terms. Oops. And neurocoherence means being in tune. Neurocoherence has different words that describe it. Unity, we're centered, we're grounded. Athletes say we're in the zone, we're in the clear, everything's clear, and we're in the flow. And it's interesting in the science paper, which they say the frequency and amplitude of the synchronicity of oscillating neural patterns between brain sites. That's the science word, the quantitative word in the quantitative language of coherence. Frequency and amplitude, and synchronicity is another word for resonance, and oscillating is another word for vibration. It's oscillating, and it's oscillating neural patterns and neural networks. And it affects the nervous system, what we call the gut-brain axis. There's over 1 billion neurons in your brain. That's your logic and your reason. Your heart has 40,000 neurons. That has to do with your value, love, feeling, empathy. And your gut, which is your intuition and instinct, has 100 billion neurons. And you want to think of your heart, your brain, your heart, and your gut as a teeter-totter, with the heart being the center, the fulcrum, and the brain wanting to quantify everything, and the gut is qualitative. It wants to, it's instinct and have a gut feeling, and that has to be put together with your heart into empathy and love. The two are constantly balancing. So science can help, and at the same time intuition can help. But when science is out of balance or intuition is out of balance, the heart needs to put them back together. And this is the science, and I like to translate science sometimes into more intuitive language, which I think scientists need to do more often. But we see at the bottom this development and propagation of spiral waves via neural coherence. In other words, when we're coherent, and you'll find this with tuning forks, when you have, like, for example, C and G, and you listen, the two sounds, the relationship between the two sounds will create a spiraling vortex. Whenever we're coherent, we will always enter into a spiral-like pattern with the vortex. The scientists say at any one moment, many neural groups in our gut-brain axis are active. In other words, lots of different possibilities. These activated neuronal groups oscillate and thereby undergo rhythmic excitability fluctuations that produce temporal windows for communication. Well, that just really means in your life, you've got a lot of stuff going on, and especially in today's world, and you've got a lot of windows that you need to communicate with a lot of people, and you have to constantly switch between these neuronal groups that are activated. And they're activated, we must understand, not only in our brain, but our gut and our heart simultaneously. But when only coherently oscillating neural groups can interact effectively, because their communication windows for input and output are open at the same time. In other words, when you have your head, your heart, and your gut working, and those neuronal groups are coherently oscillating together, they're in resonance together, then we have the ability to receive and give, to receive and communicate simultaneously and accurately. And they say, thus, a flexible pattern of coherence defines a flexible communication structure, and it is fundamental to all cognitive and intuitive flexibility. And I put the word intuitive in there because scientists don't like to say it. They leave it out. I put it in, and I am a scientist. So, and neural dissonance, we say, is being out of tune. And a coherent relationship with neural dissonance is an opportunity to create new life possibilities. And we misunderstand dissonance and being out of tune. In fact, I think being out of tune is just as important as being in tune, and I'll explain why later. But cognitive dissonance, it means confusion. In other words, neural dissonance shows up as cognitive dissonance, which is confusion. We feel frustration, unorganized, anxiety, and panic. I'm sure many people feel that in today's world. They've always felt it, but it seems to come a little faster now. Somatic dissonance, which is our body, or we feel mentally and emotionally and physically discomfortable. We have most pain, by the way, is emotional or mental. And of course, we have a world now where many drugs are being described to help us with emotional and mental pain. They don't really work. They give us a break, though, perhaps. Loss of rhythm, we feel headaches, and colon disorders begin to show up, just to say a few. And in science, it's called complex network geometry and frustrated synchronization. And you see these wonderful pictures of, oops, what happened? There we go. You see on the right, networks all over the place, and you see the left. In other words, you see the different levels of coherence and incoherence, discoherence that can happen. We're frustrated. And in today's world, we have, in modern science, we talk about stress science. And stress is, stressors, what we call distressors, are dissonance. And they're asking us to change. In other words, a stressor from a frequency point of view is a new frequency. And when we come into resonance with it, it can become beautiful music. When we don't become into resonance with it, it becomes distress, or what we might call in sound noise. And when we have distress, we don't come into resonance, we get all of these things happening. You can see in the left, everything you can imagine begins to start taking place. And then we have to be careful, because we run out, we say this leads to different eating patterns. It leads to us wanting to take drugs, either illegal or legal, that want us to get rid of these symptoms, to fix them, whereas they're actually, we want to look at the bigger holistic way to fix them, which is coherence. Coherence, and your brain becomes nature's drugstore when you're coherent. Right? So we have an alarm response, and if we don't meet it, we say if we don't come into resonance with the frequency, we go into distress. If we meet it, if we take a breath, we use our breathing, we begin to say, I'm going to learn how to come into resonance here. We accept change. We use our creativity to adapt to it. We create new states of neuroplasticity. We come into resonance with the stressor, and the result of that, our whole body, everything spontaneously reorganizes. Coherent resonance equals spontaneous reorganization of our whole being over and over. When we do this naturally for frequencies that we're aware of, we just shift. It's like your car automatically will shift gears with an automatic transmission. But when we come up against something that we're not sure about, we're unsafe with, we need to do some work. That's what we might call therapy. That's what we call your breathing and the things that you can do at home to help yourself. And neuroplasticity is something that sound is very good at doing. It's called establishing a coherent relationship with neural dissonance. That's what we want to do. It requires expanding oneself, through the spontaneous creation of new neural networks that are created by coming into resonance with dissonance. We want to prune, we want to form and create we have to keep expanding. It's called, by the way, it's expansion in other languages is called the continual expansion of consciousness. Coherent resonance is consciousness. Consciousness ultimately is our relationship with frequency that we perceive as my boss, my neighbor, what's going on in the world as things and events, but we still need to learn how to creatively adapt to these changes. We need to learn how to create new life abilities, and we need to discover new relationships and make new connections. All of this has to be happening all the time in our life if we want to be mentally and physically healthy. Mind, body, medicine. And when we can do this, we become self-regulation. We're self-regulating human beings. We achieve the achievement of resonant coherence with dissonance. We learn automatically. We become confident. No matter what happens, I know how to get back to a resonant state. And it's guaranteed that if you think the whole world should be constantly resonant, it's not going to be. What you need to do is have the skill set to be able, that's what I think we're learning in all our classes here, skill sets that allow us to come into resonance with whatever's happening in our life. In other words, to appreciate it. Because once we come into resonance with it, for example, in sound, it can be noise and horrible, and then we come into resonance with it, and it's music. Because music's in the ear of the beholder. And you think, well, it used to be people thought rock and roll was the devil's music. And now, a good example is Stravinsky came out with his Rite of Spring, and doctors sued him and said it was evil. And now we go to concert halls, and everybody with lots of money pays a lot of money to go hear Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and it's now resonant for them. So we're constantly having to change and expand our consciousness. And the process of coming into neural resonance with a stressor requires losing network connections. In other words, you want to make life more simple. And this is where we'll talk about meditation with breathing, which is simple, and sound, C and G, which is simple. It's through coming to a more simpler place that we are able to gain strength in order to form new networks in resonance with the stressor. So at first we think, let's go get the stressor. We go all tight like this, but then we say, wait a minute, if we're safe, let's back off, let's breathe, let's get some care, get accurate feedback of in and out information in order to come into resonance. In this model, we have a 5-star pattern, which is very, very much part of the body pattern of our shoulders high, our hips, and so on, in chiropractic medicine, osteopathic medicine, and polarity therapy. Now we see it in neural networks. It's called a 5-neuron clique. And that 5-star clique is congruent with the 5-star geometric pattern of body alignment, the Fibonacci series, the overtone series in sound. It is the common denominator for the establishment of all coherent high-dimensional neural networks. It's something that we must always come back to in order to expand. It's like breathing. We become complex, we become simple. We become complex, we become simple over and over. And this is just a picture of the 5-star pattern. One is from Dr. Stone's polarity therapy. The other, we see on the upper left that there's a star within a star within a star within a star when you come back to this simple pattern. And within the center of the stars is a vortex. And the lower left, where you see the red and the green, that's basically a vortex going through levels upon levels upon levels upon levels. The total expansion of consciousness. Dr. Stone would call the center, and polarity therapy would call the center when you're in the vortex. He called it Santa Claus coming down the chimney, meaning that when you're in the space of literally total silence, you're able to ascend and descend and get off at any level of vibration that is most appropriate for you to meet the stressors in your life. And we see again our body as a vibrational body. And I have a quote on top, which is my favorite from scientists. It says, we are a self-tunable resonating crystal with the ability to oscillate in different nonlinear field relations. I love it. That means that, guess what? You're a crystal, and you're oscillating, you're vibrating, and you have the ability to stretch, move, bend, and so on in multiple dimensions. And of course, the founder of chiropractic medicine said that consciousness is determined by and must accord with acoustic vibrations that are relationship to frequency. And we see again in the diagram that there's waves that are constantly moving through our joints. And when our joints are flexible, as in, say, Hatha Yoga, we learn to move and move in Tai Chi. We learn to dance and move our joints with the energy that's moving through us to be its somatic flexibility. And the goal of modern biology is to understand how a system's form influences its function. And that's the basis of bodywork and somatic psychology. And human neural networks manifest structure, form, relationships. In other words, constantly, what's inside is outside. As above, so below. And converging research suggests that when neurons fire in coherent spatial temporal patterns, we are capable of transitioning from one spatial temporal geometry pattern to another at light speeds. At light speeds. That's how quickly we can adapt to stressors. And that's my end. And I think, Diana, we can...
Wow. My hand is taking notes as quickly as possible. I have several questions, John. I think what's fascinating to me is that Santa Claus coming down the chimney.
Right.
Is that the 7 still points?
Yes, that could be levels. there's levels, and in other words, we must realize that whatever's happening in the world at a neutral level is vibration, right? So there's so many things going on that we judge, we value, and so on, but underneath everything is vibration. And the vibration has no morality. It has, in other words, I tell people this all the time. We have in polarity therapy, for example, ether, air, fire, water, earth, is the chakras. And everybody, oh, the chakras, the chakras. I said, well, just go to the top of a cliff and jump off. And halfway down, state of the earth at the bottom, I changed my mind. Right? In other words, vibration doesn't care about us. It's timeless. Vibration has no time. It's everything, and therefore consciousness is what allows us to relate the vibration. And so, therefore, in a vibrational universe, consciousness is expanding constantly as the universe is, and there's different ways, different relationships we can have that are called by different names, higher self, lower self, whatever it may be. But the vortex at the center, and that's, by the way, in the chakra system, that vortex is called the Anahata chakra. It's at the heart. It means the silent sound. And from there, when you have people doing their breathing, I like to have people breathe, and like I say, listen, meditate with C and G,
Right.
And have a daily practice. And when that happens, you constantly come to the balance point, and you ingrain that no matter what's happening, you can get back.
Yeah, it's about the skill of developing, that we've been doing all week about the inner peace, getting different methods to bring us back to inner peace. And this is the perfect vehicle. And can you talk, is that the ultrasonic core?
Yes, Dr.
Right.
Stone would call that in polarity therapy the ultrasonic core. It's the core of our soul. It goes by so many different names, right? And the scientists, refer to it as a vortex or 0-point energy. In other words, there's a place where science and ancient science and energy science merge. Now, it's a teeter-totter, right? If you can't talk the quantitative language, they think that you're ignorant, and if you talk the intuitive language, to a quantitative person, they're like, oh my God, that person's flaky. But what we want is that balance between qualitative and quantitative, between quantitative frequency and qualitative frequency, because we all have feelings. Mm-hmm. We all need to navigate them. They're all important. And the hippies had it right. It's all vibrations, man. I mean, it
Right.
is. And how we relate to vibrations, if we relate to a vibration in resonance, we call it resonant coherence. And if we relate to it without that resonance, we call it distress, or a stressor. And our body, the shape of our body, is dancing constantly with frequencies. And therefore, we could say, I don't like it, but if you say, I don't like it like this, it's going to cause you, can you imagine the biochemistry of walking around like this all day?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then my problem, by the way, I think, I'm both a psychologist and a naturopathic physician, right? Meaning that I like drugs, I like medical drugs, I like all kinds of drugs, but they've been overused in the modern world because the drugs like benzos and so on are, and people will take them in order to not have to feel something.
Right.
Right. And the reason for that is I understand it. They don't have the skill set
Right.
that we're trying to give them so that they can learn how to come into resonance, how to deal with these stressors that are coming very fast in the modern world. Thus, my appearance now, and thus my total congruence and coherence with everything that's being done at the university there.
Right. I mean, we're all bombarded by so much. It's such an important aspect of life is to be able to make relationship to our inner selves.
Yes, absolutely, because we're dancing constantly. And there's a book out that I read when I was learning psychotherapy and working in mental hospitals. I love the title. It's called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden.
Mhm.
right? And if the world, I don't know if this universe is ever going to be, beautiful in the sense of it has to be. In other words, if you want to make it beautiful, you can become authoritarian and you can put everything in order, right? And that's trying to control. It never works, right? And it never works the other way either. The beauty comes in music's in the ear of the beholder, right?
Right.
The concept of ugliness like this is one of lack of coming into coherence with that what you were perceiving. And it may sound theoretical, it is, but also it's not, because I use it as a total basis of every therapy I practice. I know it can work. I've seen it. I know the research is confirming it now. It's just a matter of us becoming more conscious and teaching these skill sets more so than go and take these drugs.
So you're talking about a basic metaphor of like we're a satellite dish receiving all this information, and our perception of the information is really how it's going to be resonant or dissonant.
That's correct. Yeah,
Right.
we're constantly, if we're coherent, we take things in and out all the time, so quick, at light speeds.
Right.
At light speeds. This is science. I mean, this is, we're talking about, we perceive things happening, we would say in the unconscious mind, right? In our somatic self, we perceive things going by at light speeds. And we pick what we want to relate with that comes to our consciousness. Sometimes the people say, I'm getting downloads, right? And then later it comes up to upload. We upload it.
Right.
That's more internet, but the internet's
Yeah.
nice because the internet gives us good metaphors.
Right.
And sound, to me, from an internet, is an algorithm. Different sounds are algorithms that allow us to adjust our consciousness to different relationships. They've been around for thousands of years, and in the modern world, boy, again, modern medicine has not paid attention to music and sound, really. It's changing. But every healing system before has seen it as a royal road. It's changing. Things are changing, right? But
Yeah.
sound and breathing and color, all these things have been integrated over and over throughout history. And we're
Right.
just now learning to integrate them again. It seems like new knowledge, but if you grew up 100,000 years ago in India, it'd be normal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about community, how we can somehow create a neural network of connection for us to maybe bring it up the critical mass into a tipping point, so affecting the whole?
But that's what we're doing. And the word community means communion, and the word communion means coherence. And we need support. There's no way that we can do it without setting up as inside, so outside. So if you are setting up your own neural networks in coherence, you will attract outside of you others that are doing the same, and over and over. It's just how it works.
We're vibing them out, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's back
the
to the,
it's sympathetic resonance. It's the nature of a vibrational world. Everything's vibrational. The quantum field just means to quantify vibration. And the things that the original quantum physicists thought that were strange, like quantum entanglement and wave-particle duality, they're normal. They're normal. We live it all the time. They didn't know how to relate to what they had discovered. And then, of course, they went to India, and Schopenhauer and stuff, they found Vedanta, and they said, how did these people know this before we did? And there we have the hubris of science.
right. Wonderful. And the qualitative of felt sense,
Yep.
right?
Yep. It's the whole basis of somatic psychology. We
Right.
say, what physical what emotions are you having? What thoughts are you having? And then what physical sensations are you feeling in your body? And when you that's going to an acoustic vibrating body. And when you go there and you don't focus on thoughts and emotions, the vibrations are neutral. They have no value. You want to disassociate your thoughts and your emotions from that state. And then that state that you didn't like just becomes vibratory. and when it becomes vibratory, then your body begins to spontaneously organize around it.
Which is meditation, isn't it?
It's meditation. That's right.
Coming into neutrality.
It's coming into neutrality. But again, I think the problem that we have is that everyone's seeking constant coherence. And I like to say that constant coherence is the most boring thing in the world. I mean, you're going to walk around all day. I'm in tune. I'm in tune.
Yeah, right. You got to have the flavor of life.
Go, don't bother me. I'm in tune. You know.
Right. Don't have the dog bark.
Exactly. Don't. The dog can't bark. The car can't honk. I'm in tune. I'm in tune. You know. And it's interesting that I oftentimes give the example when they first made electronic instruments. They had the synthesizers that we play.
Right.
They advertised them as being perfectly in tune, and nobody would buy them. And then a man came along, a scientist, a mathematician. He invented something called fuzzy logic, which is fundamental to all our cameras, computer, algorithms. He invented it. We didn't want it in the West. The Japanese wanted it. And they started putting it into camera chips and stuff like that. And then they started putting it into the synthesizers that you play your keyboards. Like I have my little keyboard here. They made it so that the perfect tuning went in and out of tuning all the time. And they couldn't stop selling the synthesizers.
Kind of like a yodel or something with your voice.
You know, we're wired for being out of tune and coming back in tune. That makes the breath. That's your breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
and that neural dissonance, what we call stressors, are opportunities. In
Right.
India, they would call the stressor Shiva, right? You know, it's Shiva comes to shake us up to have new opportunities. But it's a matter of having the skill sets that we need to teach to honor our stressors as teachers.
Beautiful. What do you think is the most potent? I know the fifth you spoke about, and we always do when we talk about sound healing, for developing those skill sets.
Yeah. Well, I think the simplest thing that I recommend for everybody, and I like to go to simple, right?
Right.
Because if I tell people, let's go meditate on car horns honking, that's a little complex, right? I do, but I like simple. And for me, I use a C and a G, and they're quantified. They have numbers, frequencies, and they're moving back and forth. They're like little vibration beings. In fact, these two tuning forks in ancient language would be Shiva and Shakti. They would be yin and yang. Right? And so they're really simple. And we learn to tap them either like this and move our body because we want to have like a qigong so the energy comes through. Or we learn to tap them back up. If you see my knees, we tap them like so.
Little softer.
It's softer, and you hold them in your ears like that. It'll be a quiet, silent meditation,
Beautiful.
and you can just meditate, or you can do meditation and movement, qigong. So simple. And like I say, if you don't have the forks, I've recorded them, right? So if you want, you can listen on headphones or with your speakers. It's fine. I'm not here to say that it's just a tool. You know, it's very powerful. It's got the research. It creates. My research shows how doing this will spike a molecule called nitric oxide in your body.
Puffing.
It moves. It moves like your breath, right? And the nitric oxide is antibacterial, antiviral. And when you're not relating to stressors, what happens is that it flatlines. So when you're doing this every day, just for a couple minutes, right? So it's a practice. You just don't do it once and go, well, that was neat, right? The important thing is we learn how to do this through good times, through bad times. I tell people who are meditating, oh, wow. I said, well, when things get really bad, can you keep meditating? Right? Because that's when the meditation, you have to sit there and meditate with dissonance. Right? And then you learn how to be with it. And when you learn how to be with it, you come out of your meditation, you're going to have a better relationship with it. So being in tune and out of tune, having good times, having bad times, whatever it may be, is I don't see that ever changing because that's the expansion of consciousness. What I do see changing is we have more skill sets available so that we can keep expanding further and not get involved in some of the silliness of 1,000 years ago. We want to expand past that.
Right, exactly. I mean, we are on a tipping point of consciousness, right, with the pandemic and everything in our planet. Can you talk a little bit more about the auto tuners?
Yeah, well, I make another tuning fork that's use a bigger one.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
yeah, this one has actually a smaller crystal. An auto tuner is just has two weights on the end, and the weights are designed to make the stem shake, right? More. So if you tap them like this, it's easy to tap on your knees, and I think maybe you might be able to hear it. Oh, there it is. Hear it.
I can't
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
hear.
It's harder to come through because this is designed that you put it directly on your body like this.
Right.
It's called vibroacoustic, right?
And when you put it on the cranium, and I do it
Yep.
most mornings, especially the
Yep.
mastoid,
Yeah, it's
it just
yeah.
it resonates the whole head just with
Well,
such and just to mention, I know Thea's not here, but the other tuning fork with the rose
yeah,
quartz that she has in her amazing little pamphlet, Beauty and Sound,
yeah.
everyone.
We have lots of crystals. We love crystals, right? And then for you can actually take and put them on your face and stuff like
Uh-huh.
this, and it makes such a soft thing like so, and that affects the trigeminal nerve and the facial nerve. And if you put it back here, it's the vagus nerve.
Right.
And on my website, I have protocols for vagus protocol. We have all kinds of protocols you can do this with. So
It's
that's
an experience, everybody on the call, to just have that feeling of touching the skin with the crystal in
oh
an
yeah.
auto tuner.
And they're shaking, and it's making this research vibration of vasodilation, nitric oxide, and it's like having a facelift. It's like,
Vibratory,
yeah, it's a vibratory facelift.
definitely. Well, John, now that we have you here, is there anything that you can share that you see as a visionary of the future for not only sound healing, but healing as a consciousness expansion? Something that we can hold on to for some aim.
Yeah. Well, again, my main focus at the moment is that everybody have a practice, right? Because I don't want, I'm doing my best not to get into fixing in that way, meaning like, I understand there's a need for it, but at the same time, we need to also be responsible. And a daily practice means that you just stop for a moment, even just 2 minutes. But with the C&G, for example, 2 minutes a day is better than no minutes a day, right? And so I would call it homeopathic. We need to do something where we pay attention to ourselves, where we have this almost instant coherence, and we say, yes, I remember I'm home. I'm home, right? I'm at this place for a moment. And we remind ourselves that everything that's going on around us, that we have this place, right? And we need to build it. It's not like you get it once. You need to constantly return to it. That's what a practice is, until it's ingrained, until it's, in a way, unconscious. It's just like, it's a place that you would automatically go. And once you have that, then we can begin to explore the beauty of the vibrational field. And there's so many possibilities, so many things going on that are just, well, we don't explore these things. I like to say in the 60s, we learned this to get high. I mean, no. That didn't work, right? So we don't want to get high. This is not a party kind of deal. We want to do this so that we can live a quality of life of value. You know, so
Yes, talk about the value. I love your second book on that. Or in the, is it in relationship to quantifying and qualitative
yes,
values?
absolutely. Well, value is the heart,
Hmm.
right? And all of us have values, right? I call it values, and there's a science, psychological form of counseling called values clarification. And oftentimes when we act congruently, in coherence with our values, so
Hmm.
we define our values in our head, right? And we make sure, yes, I like that. This is my value, and we feel it in our gut. We need to express it, balance it with our heart, and express it. That's called, when we clarify it, we need to express it and share it, and there comes community.
Hmm. Through the self-expression of singing,
Through the throat.
chanting.
All of it has to be expressed. I value this in the world. You know,
Right.
like I say, I value healing. I value people getting along. I also have other values. I value playing golf. I mean, I value I love playing. I value, and other people can have different values, but they need to express them. And when you express them, people will begin to be attracted, and that becomes coherent resonance, and you make a community of common values.
Beautiful. Definitely peace. Peace
Yeah,
on the
well,
planet.
but there's in that community there's support, but as we know, uh, it's always going out of tune.
Yeah.
No, I like to say if you want to have a community that doesn't go out of tune, if you really believe something is possible like that, join a cult.
With an authoritative
An
dictator.
authoritative person running it. As you
Right.
can see, in our times, authoritarianism is becoming very popular.
I'll say.
It looks like a solution. Uh, Never has been, but it looks like a solution. But when you learn to be responsible for yourself, you starts with you, and then it builds out from there.
Right. The response,
Yes,
your response
your
is,
response.
is so important in living life basically in a balanced, harmonically sound life. Not that dissonance doesn't play a role because that's part of us moving, right? As
We
a
need it. That
oscillating,
this is
human
dissonance.
experience.
Dissonance is the spice of life.
Sometimes it can be a little bit more spicy than
Well,
other.
if it's too spicy, you need to have a therapist to help you. Right, right. I
Temper
mean,
it down.
look, this, so, I am a doctor. I mean, like I said, I've worked with lots of organizations. I've seen lots of suffering. I understand. I don't like to see people suffering. My heart goes out. Uh, and I haven't found any magic or anything like that, anything I wave my hand. I've just found processes that people, and I'd rather teach people, as the word doctor means teacher. I'd rather teach people skill sets that they could use, and
Right.
then once they begin to do that, it's called, in a way, it's preventative medicine,
Hmm.
right? And then from there, we would have medicine. Like, for example, I have nothing against the medical model. I just got a new hip. I mean, I love it. I love it. Thank goodness. But again, the difference with being my relationship to my hip and how I recovered is very different than most people. And every physical therapist and the doctor I had said he can believe it. But again, the balance, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
my surgeon said, "Oh, I'm master. I did it. You're done." And I said, and we looked at all the people we did surgery on, and some of them recover, some of them don't, some of them never sit on their, like the physical therapist said, most people sit on their couch and don't want to move, you
Yeah.
know. And whereas I was up and going, I couldn't stop. In a matter of a week, I was walking a mile with a new hip. They said it's
Right.
impossible, but I had the chi, my tai chi, and everything going.
Yeah.
So again, I like it. They fixed it, but I also my surgeon agreed, and all of us agreed that it's that relationship. And I bow to him. I said, "Thank goodness you've taken this road and you've done this." But my relationship with it is this one of honoring you and honoring these other skill sets and putting them together.
Right. Exactly. It is about the practice. The Eastern philosophy, just the more you practice, the more you practice, the more you practice. The Western model is,
Yeah,
taking a
no,
pill or,
exactly.
taking away the symptom. And so I think it's really a blending of both, you
Yeah,
know.
I always wondered why, I when I was doing my hip surgery, I go into my primary doctor's office, and there'd be a TV going with the news. And showing you all the bad things in the world before you go in and get your blood checked. And I said, wouldn't it be nice if we could just tune people with tuning forks before, or maybe you could have skill sets on your video camera about things you could do for yourself. And I look around and there's posters for drugs you can take. And I say, something's out of balance here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, I don't think the medications are out of balance. I don't think the approach is out of balance. I think it's just, they're not teaching people what they know. They're supposed to be scientists, but you're not teaching people the tools you need to self-regulate. And then once you practice those, you're going to have problems still. I have my hip, I still have problems. There's no magic, but it's definitely a nice balance.
Hmm.
And I
Well,
like, yeah,
you can
I like,
play golf, right?
yeah, I play golf, but but instead of taking a lot of Advil, I take turmeric. I mean, and I take it on a regular basis. Good for my kidneys, less pain. I saw in the chat somebody passed by saying, "How old am I?" Just so you know, I'm 75.
Wow. Yeah,
And,
you're looking good.
and I've been practicing in the healing arts for over 50 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
So, and I'm still going. I'm still percolating. You know,
well, we need you. We need all of the information you've gathered your whole career lifetime. It's been an extraordinary amount of information, and I'm always totally fascinated by your take on so many aspects of living a holistic life.
yeah.
And
Well, I think it's I just want people to be, for 50 years, all I've wanted is for people to be well, for people to find out what is their own values. I used to teach people all the time, what are your values? How can I help you express them? And when you're well, when you're expressing your values, your heart coherently, your brain is going to create chemicals that will be naturopathically spread through your whole body. They're antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory, and then naturally you'll become, everywhere you'll attract more and more of that expression around you in supportive communities. But again, as I say, I tell people I never promised you a rose garden, because when you start expressing your values, someone's going to say, I think that's bullshit, or I don't like it. And you're going to have to deal and have a good relationship with hurt, but not being understood. And a good relationship means consciousness.
right. Yeah. And grounding it in your neural networks.
Absolutely. Because you think if I express my values, everyone's going to like me. It's not true.
That's so true.
It's not true.
Well, people are threatened too by something as simple as just the practice and coming into yourself.
Yeah, and you're going to have challenges. It never stops. 50 years, the challenges haven't stopped for me. It's just my relationship with the challenges has gotten better.
Right. Yeah. You don't get as fired up by it.
No, I don't get like this anymore. If I get like this, if I get like this, I say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Versus like making it go more and more and more. I notice it, I become aware of it, and I have a skill set to deal with it.
Beautiful.
I said, that's my trip. I went to Europe, in March and during COVID and stuff. And everywhere I went, people were like this on the airplanes and at the port. And I could just sit and I get it, and I could let go of it. I would sit and meditate. I breathe, whereas they were probably taking pills, anything to get through it. So I had a skill set, and I noticed they didn't. And it was, you talk about the pain for me was noticing they didn't have it. And I
Right.
kept thinking, I've got to keep working. If they would just stop, I could stop working.
I don't know if that'll ever happen on planet
I
Earth.
could play more golf, you know,
Or music or dance for
or
me.
music, or run around and do that.
It's so true. I mean, the ancients, they talk about them singing and dancing. You know, there wasn't the internet and television. They were just
No.
singing and dancing.
Well, the internet's fine. We just do it on the internet. That's fine. I don't care where it's at.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Is there anything else you want to offer from your experiences? I know that you started a Shift Network class that seems to be 1,000 people joining and all over the world, and anything that has come up with that experience for you, John?
Well, during COVID, for example, I was, you know, I'm very accomplished what I call in-class teaching, you know, like real people and our performance both. And during COVID, I didn't know anything about Zoom, for example, nothing. And so I said, if I'm going to learn Zoom, I'm going to learn it online because I teach online. And so I really, really got the skill set. As you can see, my studio behind me, I have all kinds of camera systems in here. I could use different microphones. And what happened was I was teaching, you know, a lot of classes. I was learning how to do sessions on Zoom. I could do body work on Zoom. I could do sound work on Zoom, concerts on Zoom. And then I had this opportunity to teach for something called Shift Network. And I said, I want to take my skill level higher. And they gave me a team of people and we worked. And my classes on sound healing, my first class was probably over 1,000 because I was told that people buy it in some countries and have other people come and watch it and stuff. So they save money that way. I'm all for that. So, and there was such a demand, I did an advanced class, a second one, which is going on now. It's actually really not advanced, it's an integrative class. So I found that all of a sudden I could reach one class, 1,000 people, 45 different countries. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the expansion of consciousness.
Right.
You know, I went from utter like, what am I going to do during COVID to really committing to learning this. And all of a sudden I never could, if I would have told anybody 4 years ago, I'd be teaching 1,000 people from 45 different countries sitting in my studio simultaneously, probably I'd be committed to the psychiatric hospital. They look at me and say, what's wrong with you? You know?
I think we've adjusted to the whole experience of online learning.
You may, I always said when I worked in Bellevue Psychiatric, I only found one difference between myself and my patients. I had a key to the ward and they didn't. That's the only thing I ever found.
I know you spoke about that last time when you were on Humanity Rising about the soundless chamber at Bellevue.
Yeah.
Can you just talk?
I came to, but I was at New York, I was actually hired by New York University to do research on community transition in psychiatric and Bellevue Psychiatric and so on. And also supervised the creative arts program of music therapy, dance, and poetry, and so on. And in my lab, we were doing research on post-traumatic stress with mice and so on. But in the corner of my laboratory was an old room on wheels. It's called an anechoic chamber. It means anechoic, a chamber without echoes, but it also means a chamber, a room developed by engineers to be completely silent and dark. And it had been abandoned. It was, I found out later, it was put there in the 1950s by the CIA. And they were doing their mind experiments and stuff. Who knows? I don't know exactly what they were doing. I'm sure it's all hidden now or lost, but it was just in the room. And I knew what it was. So I was able to go into this room, this anechoic chamber, close the door and sit in total silence and total darkness. And I would sit there and I'd use first mantras and just listening. You hear your breath gets louder, everything gets louder in the ears, and it's totally desensitized. And all of a sudden you just begin to travel. And so one day I had an experience in New York City where I was stressed up in the subway by and I didn't realize it. I was like this, and I didn't know it. And I got into the chamber, and normally when I listened to my nervous system, it was like the C and G. I could get it to go there. And that day I sat in the chamber, and my nervous system was like going, grinding, pound like chalk on a chalkboard. And the first thing was shock, because I said, how could this happen and me not know it? Right. And then I realized then I thought, how many people is this happening for and they don't know it? And I said, I've got to do something. And I ran to the music store downstairs, and I knew to get from my past training in music and psychology, I got these two tuning forks, C and G. I walked up, I tapped them, held it to my ears. In the anechoic chamber, my nervous system goes, the second it heard the sound, it goes, immediately, like this, that fast. And simultaneously, what I didn't know was my body must have been like this. And I felt, everything was like, like that. It just went down into probably a 5-star pattern. And I felt this wave just run through me, just right through me. Right. And it was like, I just sat there. And that was 50 years ago. And I'm still, all I talk about is C and G. I've written books. I've done research. I've been in laboratories. I've worked with thousands of people with it. I think I got in that moment a download of responsibility.
Yeah.
And to bring this into the world. And in the beginning, no one, value-wise, guess who was interested in that in the beginning? Nobody. I said, I'm going to teach composers. They're the only people who could understand. They had zero interest in it. I'm going to teach musicians. No, they were the hardest people to understand, because I was talking about C and G being a space, and they think about it as Moon River and stuff. Da 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 da, like having. And so that didn't work. And finally, I started teaching everybody. And then I found polarity therapy, and I started teaching it in the polarity therapy context, which was perfect.
Right.
And I integrated with my psychotherapy and body work. And sure enough, I've kept with it. Yeah. And I mean, in the old days, if I had 5 students, I would be absolutely in heaven. And now I have 1,000, and it's the same. Yeah. It's not the numbers, it's the fact that where I'm coming from has never changed. My values of it has never changed. And I'm not saying along the way there's not been hurt, trauma, disappointment, ups and downs. And I learned how to relate with them. I've definitely learned how to relate with scientists tell me I'm nuts. But
then they're in the lab using your model after a while.
They are, but even in the beginning, it was musicians telling me I was nuts. When I first published in Ear magazine, they thought I was going to ruin modern music by calling it healing and stuff. And every one of the musicians and composers who came at me, who disagree with me, and sometimes in a not nice way, every one of them has come for sessions over the years and changed their mind and is now doing sound baths.
Yeah, beautiful. Well,
but if I didn't hold to my value through all of that, you see.
Yeah, you definitely grounded it on the whole entire planet. We're so grateful for it. I have one last question. In all your time working with this model, what has surprised you the most?
I don't know, actually. I think I could say it used to be when people would have a reaction, like it'd be there and they'd get upset or something like that, or I don't like it, I like it, or it'd be right in front of them, but they wouldn't grab it, and it was surprising to me how they wouldn't take it. And then over the years, I think what just surprises me now is how much it's needed. Like, for example, when they told me I thought my class is 1,000 people, I was surprised.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm going, no, this is what I've stood for my whole life. In fact, I prefer it be 1 million people, or 2 million. I mean, this is the beginning, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what the value is. And to have 1,000 people share it with me was a surprise, and then an honor, and then normal. That's what I work for. I wanted, the motto of my company is to tune the world.
Mm. Beautiful. And the wave, we're catching that wave.
Yep.
I mean, the whole resonant factory, so to speak, is just all around us. And just the congestion of noise in urban environments when you go out and walk with tall trees and just be with nature. You hear sounds that you just never hear because of all the manufactured sounds in urban environments. And
But even with those environments, once you have this built in, you learn to appreciate. Like I go to New York City and I'm like, well, I can dance with it.
yeah,
But
right.
again, that's what we call, but if somebody's really sick, I want to do something simple. We start with simple and gradually we get more complex. So, that's, there's no other way. You have to evaluate. In the healing arts, we evaluate what can that person handle.
Right.
Then
Pacing.
we pace them. Whereas in music, you just do what you want. But as an artist, but as a healing artist, you need to say, what can that person deal with that won't overwhelm their system, so that we can gradually build more strength and more consciousness, more capability for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you say that, I remember a story when I studied with you about the Mennonite couple that came to you because please say that and tell the audience that one I've told so many clients that story.
I forgot it now. You have to teach it.
Do you want me to tell it?
You can tell it. I've got so many stories.
They came to you because the husband, they were Mennonite in Pennsylvania, which is an Amish-like belief, religious community. And he had strayed from the marriage. And so it was kind of a marriage counselor. And you had mentioned that when you were talking to them, his ethnoid bone, when he was honest about what was happening, moved. And then you gave an antidote for them. And that the antidote, because you were pacing them on where their values were in life. Maybe you remember what you gave them as.
I don't actually.
Oh my God.
I got it mixed up with Erickson's work. That's what I probably.
So what your antidote was for the husband to pee in the bed.
No, yeah, I that's what you got it mixed up with Milton Erickson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Is it Milton Erickson's?
Yeah, it's Milton Erickson, Dr. Erickson's, and he had the couple, and he had, in order to pace their reality to come into resonance, they needed to. He gave them really positive suggestions about their marriage, how they could work things out, but only if they peed together in the bed and slept in it for a week to pay their penance.
Wow.
And that's just because they needed to that, but not as punishment. They needed it with the good words, and afterwards, sure enough, that was his marriage counseling. That
was the penance that they valued.
Yeah. Now that may sound strange, but if you understand vibration and resonance and people's reality, my teacher was a psychiatrist named R.D. Lang, and everything was about coming into resonance with your patient. And then you would know your patient because you yourself have, through mirror neurons, ultimately have become your patient.
Right.
So you know what they need, but you only do that at the level that's safe for you and them. Right. And then and then your intuition kicks in, you get thoughts, and your skill sets kick in, your heart comes, and all of a sudden you begin to take actions in that patient's best interest. That they can really take in and resonate with. Yeah, just so you know, I would not recommend peeing in the bed as a treatment. So if I get a lot of emails about should I pee in my husband or something,
Well,
I would say,
okay, that's another subject. We'll let that go. I think we should bring Jim back in and look at any of the
good
questions.
idea.
Get some water in you, John.
I need water
I didn't
for
mean
that.
to upset the balance.
Jim.
Welcome back, Jim.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. I'd like to kind of return to discussions to something more specific on the tuning forks and the efficacy of sound. I have a tuning fork, which I got on your website. Thank you very much. I use it almost every day. And for those who use it, I was interested in your understanding of the difference between when you use the end of it on the body and then just holding it over the body. Is the effect the same, or is there a difference outcome depending on how you're using the fork?
The effect is the same, right? Meaning it's now not so much the effect, but the intensity that you put on. For example, if I have this tuning fork and I tap it and I'm just going like this, your skin hears better than your ears. In fact, if you're in the room with somebody and they're 30 feet away and you're talking, the puffs of air coming out your mouth are stimulating their skin vibrationally. That's why I didn't like masking a lot, for example, right? So the moment you have it like this, like over your head, you have it on your skin like this. If you just tap it like this, hold it that far off your body, your skin is hearing that. But when you take the same frequency and you take it, you put it and press, it's hearing it louder, right? So it's a matter, of dynamics.
And how far into the body does it go? So, for example, if you're trying to do something with your heart or your kidney or your prostate or lungs or something, or you have some discomfort in, say, a shoulder, and you put it in, how far into the body does the harmonic go?
Well, if you were to take this tuning fork and put it on top of your head and press, if you had the right measuring device at your big toe, it would pick up the frequency. It's going through your whole body. It's just that the volume, the intensity is stronger here, but it's setting up a wave that moves through your whole connective tissue system to your feet.
So if I'm putting it on my heart, I often just put it on the right in the center of my chest. That's going through your whole chest cavity.
It's stronger here, but it's going everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Which we talked about, the liquid crystal matrix of the body.
But it's also when I showed in the slides, there was this picture of a skeleton with the waves moving through.
Right.
It's the same thing. Once you put it on, it's stronger at that point. But the rest, that's what makes it naturopathic, I think, because it's not just something you do locally. It's now having a local effect and a universal effect through your whole body.
Great. Well, thank you. Then the next two other questions. One is around the production of nitric acid.
Nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide. Using the tuning fork also increases the nitric oxide in the body, or is it just
it doesn't increase it. It's become flatlined, right? In other words, it's a gas that rises and falls. And when you put the tuning fork on, it stimulates it. If it's been suppressed, it stimulates it. It's kind of like saying, wake up, right? And then it goes back into its natural rhythm. But if you do the tuning fork too much, you're saying wake up too much, right? So less is more, actually, with especially with these tuning forks, right?
Yeah. The CG one, that's the one.
Well, this is the C. This is a C128 with the weights. In other words, that's the one when you put it directly in your body, right? That's when it's stronger at a point, right? And you don't need to keep putting it on because it's just a couple times is enough because it's stimulating. We say it's spiking. That would be the technical term. It's spiking a rhythm that's going to, as the stimulation settles down, that rhythm takes off on its own.
Uh-huh.
So doing it, say, 2 or 3 times on a particular spot is sufficient on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And also when you do this way, you can do more because this is a different kind of stimulation. It's not as strong on the physical body. Right? So you can tap like this and hold in your ears. But actually, even with this, a minute or minute and a half a day, just listening is plenty. And remember, that sound is coming, it's hitting your ears, it's getting your vagus nerve through your ears, it's going directly to your brainstem. It's going right to what we call the cerebral spinal fluid, the core of the body, and it's actually repatterning it to your values. If you put this with your values take on a geometric pattern in your cerebral spinal fluid. And that's the fluid that goes down your chakras and up, back up, and so on. That's what a fluid that's called ambrosia, the nectar of the gods, or the dew from heaven. And osteopathic medicine, Dr. Stills called it the highest known element in the human body. And that's ultimately what I'm after doing, is repatterning the fluid.
Right. Liquid light.
Liquid light.
Now, another question I had, John, was the relationship in your understanding between the voice and something like a tuning fork, because obviously all the chants that one can do, for example, the Om is just a quick example, have a certain resonance. And now, is there a difference in your understanding between using the voice to tune and using a tuning fork? Because one's sort of from the inside out, the other one's from the outside in.
Oh, I prefer the voice. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I often tell people when they use the tuning forks to tap and then hum.
Yeah.
Because the humming anchors in that vibroacoustic feeling with your voice. And also your lips vibrating create nitric oxide. Just humming will create nitric oxide. And when you piggyback it with the sound, unbelievably powerful. Chanting, all these things done with value, extremely powerful. The tuning forks are just one tool of many, but they make it easier for people who don't want to chant and say other things like that.
Yeah. But they're all operating on the same principles, obviously. But I just was wondering whether there was a difference in effect or efficacy depending on.
No, I think there's a difference in delivery systems.
Gotcha. And then the other domain I'd like to hear your thoughts on more is around value, as you call it, in relationship to intention. Someone like Joe Dispenza, for example, talks about the fact that the most powerful force in the world is clear intention,
yes,
combined with elevated emotions. That if one has an intention about something, either in terms of health or something that they want in their lives, they combine it with elevated emotions, essentially a sense of gratitude that the thing that they've intended is already done. That is the optimal kind of force field toward healing that at least as he understands it. How would you understand the relationship between values, intention, sound? How would you describe that?
Well, first, values, as I say, require clarification. Right? You need to clarify your values, and then you need to express them. You need to put your word on them in the world. You need to bring it out into the world, right? And when you do that, I guarantee you there will be a sound bath of emotion, right? Meaning, but everybody. But remember, I said that everybody thinks, oh, it's going to be, oh, how nice you're expressing your values. But it could be anger. It could be people betraying you. It could be people loving you. It could be people supporting you. It could be people leaving you. It goes on and on. In other words, there's no lack of emotion, which just means energy and motion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because once you express your value, the whole universe around you is going to become more intense. Guaranteed.
Right.
And so I tell people again, I never promised you a rose garden, but I promise you roses, you know, but those roses have thorns and so on. So I don't disagree with Joe. I think probably at all. As a therapist, certainly he's a chiropractor, he's more structural, I'm more of a psychotherapist. Probably, you know, I think about, I know how powerful emotions can be and how teaching people how to be with them somatically as frequencies. And then all that intensity is not isolated on an emotion, but it's just part of the gestalt of what has to happen when you express your values.
Exactly.
Which is heart intelligence. It emits from the heart.
That's right. That's heart math. That's heart intelligence. But you have to have your mind constantly adjusting what you say, your thought patterns, and so on, in resonance and congruence with your values. So if I write a book, sometimes I'll spend hours on one sentence to make sure that it comes in resonance. Is that really what I want to say? This is a writer's suffering. But the same with sound, the same with everything. I want to language myself as best I possibly can in congruency with my values. And again, that's my biggest fear when I first wrote a book was that someone's going to read it 10 years later, I said something I don't agree with. And now, of course, I'm happy about that. That shows you. But in the beginning, that was not easy to deal with.
And again, the distinction you would make between intention and values. Values are more principles,
Yes,
I would say, and intention is more volitional.
That's right. It's how you go into your values and then you move them out. Intention, information, right? You do forms, right? You know, and you say, I value that, I resonate with it, and then you bring it out into the world, and then you create a form, right? So if you talk about Joe Dispenza created a form, right? That I created a form. You know, and then if we start thinking my form is better than, no, it doesn't work that way.
No.
So I just have to be honest to the form I created, and it's constantly changing. And I need to be humble about it because it's only, it's a form of many, you know, and that we're all, when those forms can network, then we have a community. And that's always been how I've seen it. And that to me is the basis of science, is this sharing knowledge, you know, as best as possible. So
beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. This is just extraordinary. You know, I'd love to have you back sometime just to talk about Pythagoras, because you know, he's the godfather of it all. This notion that sound is somehow a constitutive part of cosmic being.
Yeah, he quantified it. He's the one that really quantified it into intervals and stuff like that.
Exactly.
You know?
And John, I don't know if you have time afterward to join the after chat.
Normally I would, but today, like I say, my wife has her family coming over, and
okay.
Well, let's wrap it up then. We've come to time, and so Deanna, just give us a quick word about tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're going to dive into mental medicine with imagery work from Dr. Jerry Epstein's widow, Rachel, and open focus meditation from Les Femi's model and his widow, Susan Shore Femi, is going to be joining us from Princeton.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
John, you're a maestro. You are a maestro.
Thank you.
And everyone, go on his website, biosonics.com, get one of these. It'll change your life. It is a beautiful, beautiful instrument, and attunes you with you and the larger ecosystem in a very powerful. And as John said, it all takes us 2 or 3 times a day, and you'll just feel better about who you are and what you're doing and your values, your intentions, and your state of being. So, John, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very
Thank you. Blessings.
Okay,
okay, everyone. Yeah, that'll do it for us for today. You're welcome to join the after session chat group. And we'll see you all tomorrow for day 5 of our 5-day program on self-help healing. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.